howdy, hola, welcome to Rising. We have an absolutely mind-shattering show for you here today. Not one, but two radars. That's right, you'll hear from both me and Briahna. Also some excellent guests, and you're just going to love our show today. I can really feel it. Don't you think so?
I'm inspired by you. I'm confident that it's going to be a wonderful show because of that intro, Robby. You're really bringing the heat today.
I'm glad to hear it. Let's take it away.
All right, well, the United States seems to be marching closer to a full-on war with Iran, as reports indicate Biden is planning a, quote, campaign in the region that could last weeks. NBC News reported that the campaign will hit Iranian targets outside of the country and will include both physical and digital attacks. Iran has warned that it will respond decisively to attacks on its territory or interests.
Meanwhile, the blame game over who got us into the current situation with Iran continues. Former President Trump blames Biden's alleged appeasement of Tehran for the tension, while Biden blames Trump's unilateral killing of Iranian General Qasem Soleimani and the pullout from the Iran nuclear deal. However, when asked if he would strike Iran, Trump seemingly demurred. Let's take a look.
This week, President Biden said that he has already decided how he is going to respond to the attack on the 3 Americans killed. If you were in the White House today, would you strike Iran directly?
It wouldn't have happened if I were in the White House. You would have never had this attack. You would have never had the attack on Israel. You would have never had the attack on Ukraine. You would not have inflation that was, just is destroying our country. The inflation is so bad.
Also in Middle East news, the Biden administration is reportedly reviewing options for recognizing Palestinian statehood following the war in Gaza. If enacted, this would represent a massive shift in policy, as for decades, America has opposed external recognition of Palestine, preferring that Israel and the Palestinian Authority negotiate amongst themselves. Additionally, the Biden administration is facing a flurry of protests, including one happening as we speak in the nation's capital. Coordinated protests have shut down major highways into the city, causing massive traffic jams and issues with even government officials getting to work.
And our own show, which was delayed our start time a little bit because of the trouble that employees had getting into the protests.
I don't think anybody will notice these particular government officials not getting to work on time, given that we just came out of one of the least productive congressional sessions of all time. All right.
So it was interesting, finally, to hear from Trump a little bit on the situation in the Middle East. However, I think it's frustrating to not get more concrete answers for what he would do differently. He keeps saying, well, it wouldn't have happened under me. Okay, that's all well and good to say that, but I do want to know, I really want to know what his policy differences would be. You can imagine the Ukraine policy being different, perhaps the Iran policy. There is, in fact, a healthy appetite among some factions of the conservative movement, conservative media, people like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens, thunderously disagreeing with the more hawkish consensus among some Democrats and then some leading Republicans like Lindsey Graham and others. Where does Trump come down on this? I think it's an open question. Obviously, he did strike Soleimani. He hired John Bolton. He certainly engaged hawkish impulses at times. At other times, he sounded a more cautious note. He did commit to the pullout of Afghanistan that Biden carried through. He spoke against the Iraq War. It's an open question, and it's a shame he didn't participate in the debates, because I would have really liked to see where his policies differ from Nikki Haley and Joe Biden.
Yeah, I mean, it is an open question only because he dodged the question entirely. He has said this a million times before, and he keeps saying it because he gets away with it. If he doesn't get the right follow-up questions, he can simply say, nothing bad would ever happen when I'm president. Therefore, I don't have to answer specific questions about what I would do in the current situation. He needs to be able to distinguish himself from Joe Biden and how he is handling the ongoing crises in the country, including, by the way, an economic crisis like inflation, which has come down and over the last year or so, in which Trump needs to address. Does he think that there's a policy rationale for that? If so, would he continue the policies that Biden had put into effect? If he thinks there's something outside of Biden's policymaking that has caused that, well, then say that, but then you can no longer blame Biden for inflation if you think there are these factors outside of his control. But he gets away with this kind of murder, and then he benefits from the public's ability to project onto him whatever policy decisions they want. And this is really incumbent on journalists, and including right-leaning journalists with who he trusts and with whom he has a better relationship, to follow up and get him on the record of some things. Because you're right, there are a lot of people out there who are frustrated with the hawkishness that's been demonstrated by the core of both the Democratic and Republican Party. Is he really offering an alternative to that, or is he just Joe Biden standing next to an elephant instead of next to a donkey.
Yeah, absolutely. At the same time, Biden is telling us exactly what he intends to do, which is coordinated strikes on Iranian targets outside of Iran, which is, I think, somewhat similar to what Nikki Haley said she would do if she was president. Again, this is all within 48 hours or 72 hours of the attacks themselves, of the killing of American soldiers, for which, of course, we should respond and bring the people responsible to justice. The question is, in this short time, there's already a consensus that not just whatever militia group perpetrated the attack, but that Iran is itself responsible. It is true, and we know that Iran funds terrorist groups and militia groups throughout the Middle East. And if you want to say they bear some responsibility for their actions, that is all well and good. That is certainly a standard that America's rivals hold the U.S. to in our funding of other regimes. So fair enough. But did Iran specifically instruct them to do this? Did Iran order them to carry this out? That would be approaching more of a confrontation with the country itself. Or is this something rogue operatives did on their own? I can't imagine we know the answer to that question. Again, this is all happening over the course of 3 days, and yet we've already decided. Biden has already decided. By the way, without, forget Congress, forget our elected representatives debating and discussing the proper response to this conflict, to this confrontation, and then empowering the president to take an action that is narrowly tailored to what they think their constituents believe is the right course of action. That is what our founders instructed. Our founders gave us a guidebook for what's supposed to happen when America is attacked. That's what's supposed to happen. But no, Biden is just going to decide it unilaterally on his own in consultation with his generals, and Congress is going to let him because they don't care to actually govern the country.
Yeah, and you're right that there is some consistency in how we are treating this with this attack, saying Iran funds these groups, so tangentially they are responsible, in how our adversaries internationally have pursued us in the past. But America objected aggressively to that approach when you see the Osama bin Laden 9/11 letter being a very clear articulation of frustration with American foreign policy in of all places, Palestine. So at no point after 9/11 was there a reckoning where we could say, without getting canceled, once chickens are coming home to roost, we need to investigate Americans' responsibility and its role as playing the rest of the world and why it's caused so many people to be angry. And yet now we're saying, well, we're going to play that exact same card and say, because a group that did this, who we really don't know the specifics yet, and our own State Department spokespeople have affirmed that they still don't have details on this. But because we know that these groups are Iranian-backed down the line, we can feel like we can provoke a full war against. They're saying it's not a war, but these strikes on Iran that have the potential for a lot of escalation. But one other point here that I don't want to just gloss over is the Biden administration articulating, inching toward recognizing Palestine as a state. I would love to see that happen, but we have to remember that this is in the context of Bibi Netanyahu spending his entire career saying, as long as I'm in charge, there will never be a Palestinian state. And as I'm about to talk about in my radar, over a dozen senior members of the Israeli cabinet and representing multiple political parties in Israel showing up at the settler conference, we are actually going to take over the Gaza Strip. We are going to settle the Gaza Strip. The difference between U.S. American stated policy and what Israel is saying about what its plans are is growing wider and wider, and it's hard not to interpret messaging from the Biden administration that is saying, oh, no, we're still going to do a two-state solution. Oh, no, we're going to recognize Palestine as a state, as an attempt to insulate itself from what Israeli leaders themselves are saying as they get farther and farther away from what the American public believes is the right course of action forward on this.
Well, coming up next, we'll tell you what's on our radars. Stay tuned.